about Mr. Epstein. And he described Mr. Epstein as, quote, the greatest blackmailer ever, close quote. Have you reviewed that transcript of that interview?
I have not reviewed the transcript, but I saw the clip of it.
Senator Kennedy had been quiet for most of the hearing. 4.5 hours in, most of the chamber had already burned through their energy, their outrage, their best lines. But Kennedy waited. He always waits. And when his turn finally came, he didn't open with Arctic frost or Crossfire Hurricane or any of the names that had been flying around the room all day. He opened with Jeffrey Epstein and a question so specific, so loaded with implication that Attorney General Pam Bondi had to sit up a little straighter in her chair. He'd been watching the hearing all morning, watching how Bondi handled the pressure, watching where she gave ground and where she held it. And now he had her at hour 4. Voice going a little rough, clearly not feeling her best, but still there, still sitting, still answering. Kennedy leaned in and told her he had 12 minutes. He planned to use all of them. He asked if she'd reviewed a transcript from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, an interview with the New York Post, October 1st. Lutnick describing Epstein in a way that nobody in that room could easily dismiss. Bondi said she hadn't reviewed the transcript, but she'd seen the clip. That's where the ground shifted. Kennedy walked her through what Lutnick said, that Epstein was the greatest blackmailer who ever lived, that what happened in the massage room he assumed involved a camera, that Epstein didn't have money from managing money. He had money from leverage, from video, from secrets. Kennedy laid it out piece by piece, not rushing, letting it settle, watching Bondi's face as the picture formed. The way Kennedy asked it, it wasn't just a question about Epstein. It was a question about what the FBI found, what the government knows, what has been sitting in evidence rooms and case files and classified storage for years, seen by prosecutors and agents, reviewed and redacted and filed and forgotten. He asked if it was true, what Lutnick described. The massage room, the camera, the tapes. Bondi said their July memo found no evidence of a client list. She mentioned the case had gone through 3 administrations. She mentioned former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta. She said they hadn't uncovered evidence. Kennedy didn't move off of it. He asked whether she had interviewed Lutnick. She said no. He asked whether she planned to. She said if Lutnick wanted to talk to the FBI or if Director Patel wanted to speak with him, absolutely. Kennedy looked at her for a moment. He didn't say it sarcastically. He said it the way a man says something when he already knows the answer is no, and he wants the room to understand what that no actually means. Don't you think you ought to talk to him after that interview? The answer she gave was careful. She said, if Howard Lutnick wants to speak to the FBI, and if Director Patel wants to speak to Howard Lutnick, then yes, absolutely. Kennedy heard it. He suggested, maybe a little dryly, that perhaps they should get Lutnick in front of the committee too. What made the moment sharp wasn't just the question. It was what Lutnick had actually said. According to Kennedy's account of the clip, the Commerce Secretary described Epstein's operation with a precision that doesn't come from rumor. He said Epstein's net worth wasn't from investment returns. It was from what happened in that massage room. He said, and Kennedy made sure Bondi heard this, that the men who were photographed didn't get there by accident. They participated. That word sat in the room. Kennedy wasn't asking Bondi to speculate. He was asking whether the FBI, with all the resources it committed to reviewing Epstein materials, had ever looked at what Lutnick was describing. Whether anyone had walked that thread back from the Commerce Secretary's interview to the case files to the 100,000 documents that prosecutors were apparently pushing through at speed to whatever was in that safe, to whatever the agents actually found when they executed those searches. Bondi held to the July memo. No client list. No incriminating evidence found. That was the official position, and she stayed on it. But Kennedy wasn't asking about the client list as a document. He was asking about a system, a methodology, hidden cameras in a private room, men who weren't just witnesses, but participants, evidence that wouldn't be filed under anyone's name because it was never meant to exist on paper in the first place. If you've been following any piece of this hearing, and you want to keep getting content that actually goes through what was said, not the summary version, not the headline version, but the full exchange, then subscribing to this channel is worth your 2 seconds. Hit the button and you'll get it as it comes. Kennedy asked whether the FBI, in its review of approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records, had ever looked at whether those files mentioned President Trump. Bondi said she wasn't going to discuss that with him. Kennedy tried a different angle. He asked who gave the order to flag records related to the president. Bondi said the same thing. She wasn't going to discuss that. There's a rhythm to these hearings that most viewers don't see on the surface. The senators who ask questions and then accept the non-answer and move on. And the senators who ask a question get told it can't be discussed, and then ask the same question from a different angle, not to be difficult, but because the deflection itself is information. Kennedy is the second kind of senator. He doesn't get loud about it. He just keeps walking forward. The Lutnick angle was the sharpest thing Kennedy raised in those 12 minutes, partly because it came from inside the current administration. This isn't a Democratic senator citing an anonymous whistleblower or a leaked memo. This is the sitting Commerce Secretary of the United States, a neighbor of Epstein's, someone who shared a wall with him, describing on tape what he believed the operation was built on. And Kennedy's question to Bondi was simple. Has anyone followed up on that? The answer, as best as Bondi could give, was that if Lutnick wants to talk, the door's open. Kennedy's follow-up was just as simple. Shouldn't you be the one reaching out to him? She didn't really answer that. Not directly. She stayed in the passive construction. If he wants to talk, if Patel wants to speak with him. Kennedy made his point without making it loud. The government has the Commerce Secretary describing Epstein as the greatest blackmailer in history, describing what he believed was happening in that room, and the Attorney General of the United States is waiting for him to call. The broader question that runs underneath all of this is one Kennedy never stated directly, but didn't have to. The FBI's July Memo said there was no client list. There was no incriminating evidence found. But a client list, in the traditional sense of a document with names and dates and invoices, may not be how this worked. If Lutnick's description is accurate, if what happened in that massage room was captured on video for the explicit purpose of leverage, then the evidence wouldn't look like a ledger. It would look like footage. And the question of whether that footage existed, whether it was found, whether it was destroyed, whether it was preserved, whether it was reviewed, whether the review was complete or truncated or directed toward particular results, none of that was answered in the July Memo. None of it was answered in that hearing room. Kennedy circled back at the end of his time. He suggested to the chair that maybe they should bring Lutnick before the committee as well. Not an accusation, just a suggestion. The kind of suggestion that means someone needs to answer this question under oath, and it probably shouldn't just be the Attorney General who wasn't there. Bondi had been in that chair for over 4 hours. Her voice was going. She'd held her ground on almost everything and taken swings back at almost everyone who pushed her. She's a skilled attorney, and she'd been thoroughly prepared. But the Lutnick question landed differently than most of the others. Not because Bondi couldn't handle it, but because the implications of it are so specific and so serious that there's no comfortable place to put it. You can argue about grant terminations. You can argue about prosecutorial discretion. You can argue about what Arctic Frost did or didn't prove. But when the sitting Commerce Secretary goes on tape and describes Epstein's operation as a blackmail enterprise built on hidden camera footage from a massage room, that's a thing that either happened or it didn't. And if it happened, the FBI either found evidence of it or it didn't. And if they didn't, why not? And if they did, where is it? Kennedy didn't get an answer to any of that. What he got was a Justice Department that says the door is open if Lutnick wants to walk through it, which, as anyone who's watched these hearings long enough understands, is a very different thing from the door being open and someone actually walking through it. He spent 12 minutes pressing on that. He had a committee chair who seemed genuinely interested in getting Lutnick in front of the panel. He had an attorney general who couldn't or wouldn't say what the FBI actually found when it went through those 100,000 documents. And he had a Commerce Secretary's interview sitting out there in the public record describing a blackmail system so specific and so operational that it's hard to hear it and not ask the obvious follow-up. That follow-up is still waiting. If you found this breakdown useful and want to stay with coverage that goes deep into the actual testimony instead of just the clips that make the rounds, consider subscribing. It's the best way to make sure you catch each of these exchanges as they come out, and it genuinely helps this channel keep doing the work. Thanks for being here for this one.